Welcome back to the NIL Era podcast. My name is Elise Bian.
And I'm Fernando Andrade. We've talked a lot about the changing landscape of college sports, starting with why it's happening and what could come about in the future.
Today, we have a very special guest with us. We are so excited to welcome academic All American first team, Pac 12 champion, ASU men's swim alum, and the swimmer behind the settlement, Mr. Grant House, to the podcast. We have an episode dedicated to the groundbreaking House versus NCAA settlement, which is episode 3. And today we are very fortunate enough to talk to the main source himself. So, Grant, welcome to the NIL Era podcast. We are so excited to chat with you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for the warm introduction and welcoming onto the podcast. I'm really excited to be here with two great people and former athletes as well. So I think this will be awesome.
I think that is a very key thing that you mentioned, Grant. Fellow athletes, I know you've been talking a lot to the media, but it's not usual for any of us to just have these conversations amongst athletes. And we'll get into how we have different experiences and our different points of views in a bit. But I just wanted to acknowledge how special this is and how exciting this conversation will be because of this. I must confess that from between episode 2 and 3, I told Elise she kept bringing up this settlement. And I was like, what is this house settlement? And that's what inspired episode 3. And then episode 3 happens. And I was like, oh, wait, house is a person? I thought we were talking about Congress here. I was confused. And then we did our research. We found out about you. So my initial question is, why you? There's so many student athletes. There's so many different sports. Why are you the guy behind this?
Yeah, Fernando, I think that's probably a multi-level response. To make it simple, though, I think I was the person to have the courage to do it. And I was probably, number 15, 13, 170th on the list ultimately. There was no specific reason why I should be here other than being at the right place at the right time. A lot of people think I took this directly to the NCAA, but I was sought out to be a representative for this. And so I never expected to be here, but the opportunity came about that I could help athletes get a better voice and help athletes for the rest of eternity, and that excited me. So that's the simplified reason of why I'm here. But ultimately, one of my teammates connected me with her mother to the law firm that I'm with at now. So she felt like I'd be a good representative for that, a good fit, and heard my name called over and said, "Mom, I think I know the guy you should talk to." So after that, hit the ground running, and here I am now. So it might sound like kind of random, but it's pretty simple at the end of the day.
So, as a sports law and business student, it seems that it was never the intent to be this lead plaintiff of an antitrust lawsuit, but just hearing that in your response, what was really the origin story and what prompted you to kind of opt in and be a part of this settlement?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, the original origin story would be in the freshman dorms. It was my roommate and I, we were teammates on the swim team, and I always had my door open. I'm a pretty big social person and extrovert, so I would always see anyone walking by and talk to them, and while doing homework or doing something. And we had this guy across the dorm, and he made music. He liked to make music. It was kind of the first person I'd ever seen like in person do that. I mean, some of them were atrocious, but some of them were okay. We were freshmen, so it was just something neat, something cool. We wanted to support one another. But we were laughing and having a good time one night, and he was like showing us some of the music he'd made, and he's like, "Yeah, isn't this crazy? Like, I could make like $1 billion off this, and you guys couldn't make one penny off this." And I was like, "Dude, what?" Like, that's a really weird comment to make. And he's like, "Yeah, well, like you're an athlete, so you can't. If you're music, like if you're making music, you couldn't benefit off of it." And I was like thinking about it, and that didn't really like sit well with me. I didn't understand why at the time, and so I'd asked the SAC president at the time of my time there, Mason Ford, incredible man, and creator of Cruel Tunes card game. So shameless plug for that now. But I went to him and I told him this, and he's like, "Yeah, like, well, something that you can help like get involved with for other athletes." is SAC. And so that's about a week later, I joined SAC. I was the president for 2 years, 1.5 years with that. And or got to that point from that when I knew I could advocate for athletes on a different forefront. But that was all leading up to, the opportunity of, being at the right place at the right time and, kind of talking with these individuals that thought I could be a good representative for the class. And, someone that had competed at the highest levels of the NCAA, every year making the NCAA tournament and finaling for swimming, and then representing Team USA 4 or 5 times at that point on some of the highest stages that our sport has to offer. Being on national television, international television. So a lot of different opportunities at the time I didn't recognize were so needed or important. But looking back on it now, kind of makes a little bit more sense why I might have been a good candidate. I'd like to say I cross my T's and dot my I's. I'm 4.0, like pretty straight shooter. Don't do like much outside the norm of what can lead to high performance. I'm shooting this podcast on 2 books that are the science of women's in sport and the science of athletic performance, peak performance. So I like to have a good time. I like to enjoy myself by all means. But I feel like the man I became today and then especially was kind of more solidifying for them than if I was Caleb Williams, Chase Griffin. Like those 2 people are much more qualified with status or clout to be a bigger role or bigger known name than myself. Fernando, like you were saying, like you thought the house was just the house of the government. Some of my closest friends, it's taken like, not my closest friends, but close friends, it's taken like 3 years into this. And they're like, dude, you're that guy. And I was like, yeah, thanks for not reading anything besides the headlines. Nice job, man. Like you just had to click one URL link. But yeah, that's I think I might be rambling at this point, but that's a pretty much the origin story of this. And just being at a local pool with my teammates. She was talking on the phone. I heard my name called, was just in my brief, and turned around, got on the call with her mom. She said, let's have another call when you're not at the pool, and got in contact with some other people, Emily Cisco, and she's been the main correspondent that I've had. I'd argue hundreds of hours of conversations with at this point. So I can't say enough good things about Emily and her process with this the whole way through, and helping me just communicate as best as possible, especially at the beginning stages of all this.
I think that anecdote that you bring up about a regular student, if we want to call them that, just saying, I could earn this money and you can't, even if we're doing the exact same thing just because of your status as an amateur athlete for the NCAA, is key. Because especially for someone like me, right? I was a freshman when the pandemic started, and that's when TikTok kind of started booming up. And if any student athlete was on TikTok doing well, they could not be able to get any brand deals back then just because of the fact that they were student athletes, even if everything was just stopped due to this pandemic. There's the obvious example, right, of someone like Noah Beck. Noah was a soccer player at Portland. We played him our freshman year, and he ended up having to choose between TikTok and soccer at the Division I level, which is crazy. And I'm curious for you if your stance has been, I don't know, affected by the fact that you were a non-revenue sport athlete, such as myself. Like I bring up this example. Did that have any additional perspective in your stance with the situation, just being part of a non-revenue making sport, which is football, basketball, etc.?
Yeah, I think the first aspect I kind of looked at is like anecdotally, I understand the references that everyone makes between revenue and non-revenue sports. I, however, really disagree with that viewpoint of things. Every sport makes a revenue, has a stream of financial involvement. And I think we've just siloed sports into what they should be or are typically or have been in the past, have been for years. It's always been this way. And for me, when I always hear like swimming is a non-revenue sport, I just say, what's the number one sport every 4 years? It's Olympic swimming viewership. And while that might change from the event, one of the highest medal counts every year is Team USA swimming. And while the biggest event I think is typically the 100-meter dash and track, almost quadrennially, one of the biggest sports is swimming. And if it's not swimming, it's track and swimming, and it's number two. And so with that example, I always just thought that swimming has such a bigger platform, and we have some pretty amazing stars in the sport, like Katie Ledecky, Caleb Dressel, two people that swam at the University of Florida that could have had exponential. Well, Katie swam at Stanford and then went to Florida to swim professionally. But two athletes that had amazing opportunities. Missy Franklin as well had just phenomenal Olympic careers and professional careers. But for swimming, it was such a fine line of no. Normally, the professional teams there train at colleges or they're in college because they're that good. And so for myself, in regards to that, I looked at the opportunity of where their greatest spotlight could be, world championships and Olympics. And so I've always viewed it kind of bewildering why we haven't been able to obtain more interest in swimming besides just old adage. I think a lot of things in swimming needs to change, but for Olympic sports, I think it takes a different approach. For a lot of them, that's a lot of things that have been done the same way for a long time. I mean, it is the Olympic Games, and it was developed, like Greece, Rome, Athens. Like these are ancient cities that have developed these sports, and we need to be more progressive in our thought process. But for me, it wasn't as necessarily the comment like just about like, oh, I can't make money with this now. Like I could get a job, I could do this, I could stop swimming and get a job as a programmer and make six figures. Like that's always a reality. But it just irked me, and it made me curious and interested in the fact of the sentiment. Like you're limiting someone's opportunity with their abilities, their gifts, their talents, their work, and their efforts to go and accomplish something that they want to. I was musically inclined when I was younger. I kind of pulled away from that to pour more into athletics. But I enjoy writing poetry. And so I was like, well, what if I just wanted to be like the most amazing poet of all time? And like, I guess I could just make it to make it. But I couldn't like benefit off that. Or someone could be the best flute player on the team, and they could never know that. The quarterback of USC or Texas could be the best tuba player, and they could make Spotify albums that break billboards, but they couldn't do anything about that. And I was like, that's just unfortunate. Like they can't, not that it's all about the finances, but they can't optimize and maximize their opportunity. So I think when I think of like the Olympic sports, I see a lot more potential than people give it credit for, because I view it from either my aspirations or the people I've associated with trying to train with the best in the world, coaches and the best in the world, that I've seen what it's like at the top. I've seen what it's like at some of the highest stages in the sport and from some of the people, and it's incredible. It's incredible what we can see, and it's incredible what they've achieved and what they do on a day-to-day basis. We just don't get, 16, 10, 12 games a season to shown on every Saturday to display that. We have a Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. at Mona Plummer Aquatic Center to have our mom and dads show up for the tickets that they get for free. So it's like when you boil it down, it can expand pretty fast.
Just to clarify from everything you said, because I think there is a very important distinction to make here. When we're talking revenue, non-revenue, I totally get your point of view, but just to make sure we're on the same page here, obviously, a sport like football is naturally going to get the spotlight way more. Like it's just a reality, right? In college, and we talked about it right now, the all of fall, there's a game every single Saturday, Friday, whatever it may be. But the point you're trying to get across here is that your stance is still the same regardless, because the Olympians are college students. A good chunk of them are NCAA student athletes, and you're saying they should be able to benefit off of it as well, which is actually crazy. I mean, obviously, we went to Cal. Personally, I'm a huge swim fan, and I know of some of the guys on the team, on the U.S. national team right now, or the Swedish national team, and they are still undergraduate students, yet they are competing at the highest Olympic level. So they are kind of pro athletes, or is that what you're saying, that they should have the same benefits of a pro athlete in that space, which doesn't involve a contract, by the way, but it does involve sponsorships? Is that the point you're trying to get across?
It's definitely in the same line and the same vision of what I'm talking about, especially for guys like Robin and Bjorn, like they're swimming and representing Sweden. Like that's an incredible opportunity that as an American I don't get. But yeah, it's such a fine line for swimming. We don't have a professional league. We did for a little bit, but that's a different story. And so pretty much if you're in college, you like are in one of the professional leagues of swimming. And so there's limited opportunities that you can get in that just by being in college, which is typically the highest level of swimming there is. So I think in regards to that, I would say that, I think it is limited in the scope. It's a hard situation because it's like, well, do I just go to a random club by myself and train by myself? That's a hard decision to make because, like you said, at Cal, there's so many phenomenal athletes, and yeah, like the other sports, basketball games are bringing more crowds, football games are bringing more crowds. They're supplying the universities with much more financial gain than the Olympic sports. I guess my tangent on that was that there's definitely more opportunity than people are realizing and seeing to improve other sports besides men's, women's basketball, and men's football on the main stage.
So in that sense there, because I think gymnastics is a very similar sport. Gymnastics in the Olympics is huge watch there. And then even in the terms of college gymnastics, like our lifespan of gymnasts, it's short. Not everyone goes pro, barely anyone goes pro. So colleges are pro gymnastics. That's what our coach even tells us is you make the most of these 4 years. So from your experience of being very high level athlete in your sport in college and outside of college and just like international assignments, all of that, how would you suggest that we grow the Olympic sports in the NCAA? Because just an example, men's gymnastics, it's a dying sport. I think with Steven Netarosik and the men's gymnastics USA team this past Olympics in Paris, I'm hoping that there's a revamp of men's gymnastics because in the NCAA, it's a dying sport. Yet all five guys on that Olympic team, they all went through 4 or 5 years at their respective institutions. And the NCAA birthed these Olympic dreams and fostered those Olympic dreams. And I think from your perspective on what you're doing, I think is a great platform to uplift all of these amazing Olympic sports and these experiences. Because like you said, the Olympics, it only comes once every 4 years, but the Olympic sports are the ones you watch and the ones you get hyped about. So I'm interested to see like, how would you grow Olympic sports in the NCAA?
Yeah, I think I'm no expert. I don't have a fortune cookie to light the way for all of us. But I mean, especially in swimming, a lot this year, especially people have talked about it. Especially for swimming, simple things such as like if it's just charging $1 for a ticket, like everyone's gonna pay for that. Like no one's gonna pretty much bat an eye. But whether that's 50 people or 300 that showed out for Cal versus ASU, like pack the stands, like that's $50 or $30 you have every meet that, or $300 that you didn't have before. So that's like a simple way, but also making the sport more enjoyable. Like swimming, the competitive schedule for the NCAA season is pretty useless. If I can be just transparent with that, like as long as if I swim the top time in the NCAA at our intra squad meet, I don't have to show up anywhere other than practice for the entire year, and then I can just go and win an NCAA championship as an individual. So there's nothing that matters like in record and points aggregate, anything like that. And I think that takes away from the suspense. Texas would be an annual team like this. They just swim like 5 seconds off their times that they'd end up going in the last month of the season, just because they're in the Big 12. Big 12 swimming is not the most stout up until I guess recently when it has the mega conferences now. So they could get away with that, and then they'd win the NCAA championship. But the format of a dual meet is just very boring, and that can be sequenced in a different way. We have the most exciting event, and then we basically go to the most boring event, and then we have to ramp it up, and then we go to a break, and then we start with another exciting event, and then we go to the boring event. Like it's like have the peaks, have the valleys at different stages, and you're going to get more engagement. And I think volleyball is the best example right now of. I'm a big believer in success leaves clues. Nebraska packed their entire football stadium for a volleyball game. Like I can't use that example enough and use it as an epitome of like what I never thought I would see like in my lifetime of like a men's or women's basketball team or a volleyball team like filling a football stadium. Like that's astronomical. It's like pretty much up there with the Olympic swimming trials being in a football stadium. Like these opportunities that we hadn't really thought of before, just because we didn't like take the time to like brainstorm, but that you can do it. Like maybe it's shifting like the volleyball season a little bit differently, so it just feeds into like the spring games of football. And so when people are wanting to go to the stadiums, people are wanting to getting interested and anxious for the fall season. They want to see the Longhorns, they want to see the Gators, they want to see the Bulldogs. Like they want to just be in the stadium. That necessarily they want to tailgate. It's not necessarily about the football like all the time. They just want the experience in that environment. And for a school like Nebraska or Wisconsin, two of the best volleyball schools in the country, in the world, I think that opportunity like amplifies exponentially for them. And I think every sport could kind of find their own niche in a way in that regard. I don't have an example for every sport, but I think there's that definitely like using the model that we've seen successes and not just using those as a one-off or like a one-time event every year, but kind of like if we see that volleyball succeeded, using the volleyball season to like maybe shift it so that we have 10 of those games, and then the next year it's 30 of those games, and then it's every games like that for the Power 5 conferences, and then also including like the non-Power 5 conferences that can take note after that too. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to just apply a little bit more effort, have some more creativity, and change what's always been the way of form for a lot of these sports. So I wish I had more examples. I haven't really thought of too many like of the necessarily like all of the sports, but some of the ones that have made note and that I'm most engaged with, it's definitely been a topic of discussion. Like swim coaches talk about this almost weekly, like, but they haven't made all the impact and change that they can yet. But I think we're getting closer to making changes for Olympic sports at a very global scale.
Yeah, definitely. I love that perspective and that kind of interest and outlet of Olympic sports, because I think just from my experience and Fernando also, like being Olympic sports student athletes, we've loved our experience and only want to see it grow. And at times I think it's easy to get pretty down in the dumps of what's going to come in the future. So it's nice to hear this new perspective. Kind of bringing it back towards the settlement. Candidly, I'm interested in who and just learning who really drove the terms of the settlement. Was it mostly driven by yourself, Sedona Prince, etc., or was it wholly kind of your lawyers?
Yeah, so I had so much involvement and a lot of communication, like I talked with, with the lawyer that I had a correspondence with and the team in discovery, the hours of going through emails, contracts, talking to sponsors, getting out emails that I had put in trash that I didn't even think were important, finding documents that I had on hard copy, talking to compliance, talking to administrators, like hours and hours of this that I would find, send to the law firm to find what they needed, to talk with them, get on calls, get off, and reset that. And so I had a lot of involvement with them in the beginning stages of that, and with the discovery, finding documents, everything like that, from contracts, prize money, travel, Team USA, any documentation, my history of the sport, like pretty much anything that I could find and took time to find. That's what some people like Sedona and I had to do. Well, we didn't have to do, but we chose to do, and for the betterment of this case. And so as kind of like time went on, we went through the deposition, and unfortunately through the settlement, we really had no and minimal involvement with the process. We had talks, of course, but it wasn't the same as like can we have this out of you, like the email? Can we have access? Do you sign off on this privacy? Stuff that all was necessary. But it was unfortunately there weren't athletes in the rooms for these. So when you both saw the ESPN headlines break, I actually probably I saw a couple hours later because my phone started blowing up with about 300 messages. I think the day that the settlement came, within about an hour, and I had no idea. I was trying to be pretty adamant about wanting to be in the know of something that's very, very important. But there weren't athletes in the rooms for those discussions, and the decisions are being made by administrators and commissioners. And I think that that's an area for improvement in the terms going forward. I think the ones going backwards, great, that's awesome for athletes. But for going forwards, we need to have athletes in those rooms without a doubt.
So in terms of like the roster cap and the revenue share of the 22%, whatever, like were you in those conversations, or was it mostly the lawyers and all of that? Like when that news came
So
out, did you like get that and be like, oh, okay?
yeah, that was like news that I got like a week later when someone was like talking about the rosters, and I was like, "Why are we talking about roster sizes right now?" Like, I get that people were worried about getting like teams getting cut, and then I'd like read an article. So I had no idea about those aspects of it, and I'll claim my own ignorance to that too. But I also just had no involvement with it, and I think I know Sedona would echo the same reaffirmation of that too, that there just weren't athletes in those meetings, and for why they felt like we didn't want to be or didn't, I'm not really sure. When you sit through an entire 7 hours and 59 minutes of a deposition, I feel like that shows how much involvement you want to be. But for whatever reason, yeah, and I think that just needs to change going forward for the settlement and for the sake of athletes having a stronger voice, because I think it's important. It can't just be the same thing reiterated over and over in different variations. It needs to be, a more unionized approach, a more like a unified approach, and a more united front as well.
Yeah, because I think from our perspective, like even just being on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, like I liked one tweet of some of the Cal men's swim guys at nationals, and suddenly I'm like on swim Twitter, and I'm seeing all this stuff about like house settlement, Grant House, ASU swimmer, all this stuff. But now hearing that you didn't have any sort of like not so say, but you didn't know that roster management was going to come out of that, all of that. So how does how do you take that when you are seeing these things online being said that Grant House is the one killing our sport, but it's like, well, maybe he's not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not trying to kill any sports in any regard. I just want to try to help athletes as much as possible and give them more autonomy and control. And one of the aspects of the settlement is that Olympic sports, like you're talking about, at least is the excitement around Olympic sports. Well, with the settlement possibly going through, I mean, the judge can always look at it for 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 days, 10 weeks, and just say yes or no. People don't really know that either, whether they like it or not. And something that I think is just really important is that Olympic sports will get more scholarships than they've ever gotten before, and that can be a great benefit. We've never had that, so we can't for sure say that, but we can't for sure say that it's not going to help it either. So I think that's an aspect that people are they see the roster size thing, and then they just immediately freak out. But I mean, I wouldn't want to take anyone's position away from them. Some of my best friends across the country, on the team ASU, have been walk-ons, have been people that have been cut, and then been my friends, still have left the team and still resided here. And so it's not an initiative to cut anyone from a team or remove any opportunities, but it was just an aspect that we weren't really included on. We weren't informed about. Just maybe if I was very adamant about, hey, I need to know this, like the initial date of like the settlement being released, I didn't even know that. I had like maybe a vague idea of a time range, but I was fully expecting things to like start to take off in August, and then May, a month before Olympic trials, I'm getting 300 messages in an hour and just saying I don't need this right now, an hour before, like a month before one of the most important moments of my life at the Olympic trials. So it was um it was definitely a unique experience for sure. I've definitely grown through it, but it was definitely kind of a bummer to know that we still have more opportunities to grow, but still need to be just as adamant, if not more, to make sure that athletes that are like Sedona, such a powerful figure in women's sports and sports overall, and Chase Griffin as well too, to get them in the rooms to help make change. And it's not just me. Like I don't need to be the person in the room. I need to be with 10,000 other athletes. I need to be with 1,000 other athletes having these discussions. I need to be with, and it doesn't even need to be me. It needs to be 1,000 women's Big Ten basketball players. Like it needs to be these big groups of athletes, because it's not just my say. It needs to be a collective, unified support for athletes, because it's all of our careers. It's all of our lives. It's not just me. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. I'm not trying to ruin college athletics or ruin sports for people. It's pretty entertaining sometimes and pretty demoralizing in other times. How many people just are like, oh, okay, you're the guy who just like hates life. I'm like, nope, I really don't want any ill will on people. It's just that's your take, I guess. I don't know what to say. Like that's just all right. Have a good day. See you never.
A conversation we've had back and forth here on the podcast as well as off the podcast, Elise and myself, is just on employment. Obviously, it's something that just continues to come up. It's something that many people have different takes on. And I'm curious, with everything you've mentioned and the power you want to give student athletes and the power they deserve, where does employment land here? And how would that look like in practice, in your opinion? Because again, Elise and I have considered this a lot. Once you go into employment, you go into pro sports, things like taxes go in, Title IX goes out the door, like all these different scenarios that people don't consider. So I'm curious on your take, and then we can expand from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a nuanced aspect for college sports that it's kind of hard to just narrow it down to one aspect. But I know one conversation that I've been interested to have heard as an athlete from as a bystander from some coaches is when they engage with that topic that I never really thought about. They're like, well, if you cut someone from a team, and this is at least my understanding from the swimming world of things. If a coach decides to cut a swimmer from a team and they haven't explicitly violated rules that are agreed upon, if they even have rules, ASU had sanctioned rules that we signed off on every year. I don't know if every team does that or not, but we do that. And so if you violated that, then the coach had a right. But if you're just not performing, not conducive to the team environment, academically, socially, athletically, then there's not too many reasons to keep you on the team unless you have a large portion of a scholarship, in my mind. And so, one conversation that I've had with coaches is it would kind of expedite this process of putting people into the real world, whatever that kind of connotation means for people. Um, of like if you're not performing, you get fired from your job. Like if you're not up to snuff on everything that your boss or owner needs, you get cut. And I understand that I was always I'd like to think I'm a high performing athlete. I'm one of the top 25 swimmers in the world. And I think I've earned that position. Like I worked hard. I dedicated my life to that. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. And I know everyone doesn't have the opportunities that I did. I know everyone doesn't have the upbringing that I did. And it's not always that cut and dry and that black and white for sure. But I do think there's an area for everyone to improve, and there's a spot for everyone to improve. Whether you want to shoot big and be the smallest fish in a big pond, or a big fish in a small pond, or a big fish in a big pond, that's your prerogative. That's your choice. But you need to understand what you're signing up for, and that's a big reason why I came to ASU because I wanted to help build it. And I always told my coach my freshman year, I was like, my hope by the time that I get to my senior year is that ASU is so good that I'm one of the slowest 200 freestylers on the team. Like that was my goal, is to help make ASU so good that was the aspect that shined brighter than everything. That a number one recruit came in and they're just like one of 10 people there. And so I think that was always an interesting aspect to hear from coaches, because you have to think about it in their perspective too. Every game matters, every title matters, every conference matters. And if they don't perform, athletic directors looking at the sheet and saying, hey, we haven't been to Pac-12s and this long, we haven't won a national title and maybe ever, like when are you going to perform? Our women's team, like this and this, like golf, like you guys haven't even made the national tournament. So they're feeling those pressures too. And so I always thought that was an interesting one. I haven't had too much too much involvement with that process other than just giving athletes the rights and the autonomy and the abilities to utilize their gifts, image, and abilities for other aspects of life rather than just the field, pool, the court, the mats, whatever it may be.
You've obviously had so much life experience, life lessons just come at you with this entire settlement. We've talked about it a bit on this podcast right now, working with attorneys on this case, being in headlines around big media networks. You mentioned ESPN, there's plenty of others. From all of this, what has been the most eye-opening lesson you've taken away from this entire process that most people just may not even think about?
That's a great question. I meditate a lot. And so I think that might answer a little bit of it in itself. But I think for me, the biggest thing would be to, when you're getting inundated with all of this, when you're getting inundated with all this noise, this sounds, this interference. At first, it would be like I have to engage with it, like it's just right in front of me. I can't run from it. Um, and it was scary. It was hard. It was really challenging. There's a lot of mornings of waking up to messages. There's a lot of nights of crying and working through that. And then it began to turn into, well, I don't want to always react like this, and I don't have to always react like this. And so it really taught me to respond to moments of adversity, have some patience, to pause and choose a moment in between reaction and response. There was a very influential book in my life that, fortunately, the high school that I went to, St. Xavier High School, Jesuit High School in Cincinnati, Ohio, one of our foundational books was called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
No way. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so easy spark notes is a man who survived, I believe, two or three Holocaust camps. So I think that explains itself of how impeccable that man's will and discipline is. But he has kind of some sentiments and his belief in his process of psychology of, we can react or we can respond. And I think during this, I mean, 4+ year process, it's just been really learning from that, whether it's family, whether it's relationships, whether it's love, whether it's joy. No matter what your emotion starts to rise, you always have an opportunity to pause, choose how you want to respond. And I think over time, it's really helped me learn how to respond in a better way, in an uplifting way, rather than just reacting emotionally. Because I'm a very emotional person, I believe. I think a lot of people who are close to me would say I'm pretty dramatic. And I get that. I did take theater for 3 years in high school, so I guess that's where it's came from. But I do think that the patience and the taking the time to respond and meditate on something, like even just getting like this invite to this podcast, like, do I want to say these things? Do I want to put my name out there? Do I want to put my words out there? And you go back and forth with that every time. And I think, for this, you two were both so inviting that it made the response a lot easier, a lot more welcoming, and much more comforting. But I'd say the biggest lesson for me would be just taking time to pause and respond rather than react.
I think you bringing up that book, at least Elise obviously knows me, and it's like anytime somebody brings up a book that I've read or that I enjoy, it like sparks something in me. And I do want to follow up a bit deeper there, just so everybody can truly understand how deep this entire process is. I don't think any of us understand what it's like to have our last name, our name literally in headlines over and over and over again, with judges, with lawyers, attorneys, against the NCAA, billions of dollars on the line, all these different things. There's a quote from that book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, that says, when a man can't change the situation, he is forced to change himself. You mentioned not being in control of all these different things, so many things out of your control. You can't change the situation. How has this entire experience changed yourself?
I think for all the, especially the reasons like we've covered in the podcast already too, is, when you're getting so much of a perspective that you don't have any idea where they're coming from. Maybe they got cut, maybe they failed at sport, maybe they are just starting sport, maybe they're scared, maybe they're angry at you. I mean, that's certainly what I believe most of the time, at least. But from their messages, but you have to understand, regardless of what initial judgment I may perceive, is that I ultimately don't know, because I don't know a lot of these people, and I just have to choose to, let that be as it is and not take that onto myself, which is easier said than done. At the beginning, it was very, very hard. I didn't really do that. I had loved ones, I had family members, I had coaches, I had admin, not talk to me, like just outcast me. And that hurt a lot. And it was shocking because I had no idea that was coming. That reaction could possibly have happened. But for me, it's just about controlling the controllables, as redundant as that sounds, and controlling my internal state and not letting the external pressures of life or external events impact my internal being as much as possible, whether it's behind the block for a race, whether it's, being on social media as big as internet and technology is today. or just, being at a meet. Like I remember I was at Irvine just 2 weeks ago, and I was really proud of how well I swam. I didn't make the Olympic team this year, and so I went to another opportunity just to see if I could improve my mastery of the sport. And I remember I had my one of my best friend from another school's cap on, and so they didn't recognize it as house Arizona State. And I heard like some people talking about like the lawsuit and the settlement, and they're like, that guy just sucks. Like he's actually just ruining everything we're doing here. Like I don't know why he was allowed to be invited to this meet. I just kind of like heard that. I was like about a lane over, and it was like 5 people, and they started laughing and like kind of saying like, yeah, like I believe that too. And I just like kind of took a big breath. I went underwater and just pushed off. And I was like, there's nothing I have to give to that situation. I wanted to cry. I wanted to punch like the air. I just wanted to do everything, but I was like, it's not who I want to be. It's not who I want to show people I want to be. And so actually I went and found someone on the other side, and I just waited until they did something that I thought was, because there's amazing athletes in the meet, and I just complimented them. I was like, I didn't have my day made, but I can make someone else's day or improve their momentary mood. So I think a long-winded answer of saying, I know I control my internal state. And I think that's the biggest thing is I can't control this aspect anymore. Like it is house versus NCAA. I never envisioned in 2018 that would be the case. I was just a swimmer that wanted to make Team USA's Olympic team and wear a gold medal around my neck. I'm still that kid. Like I think I always will be, whether it happens or not. And I hope to embody that and instill that in other kids. And I can control my process to how to get there and try to weed through all the external noise around it as I go through. But listening to that and taking that in isn't going to help me get to where I need to be or want to be at all.
Wow. Well, I think just like from this however many minutes that we've been on this podcast, I think just hearing it from your perspective and your story, I think it took a lot more courage than I think a lot of people realized. And I hope that from us to like pat on the back, like great job of just sticking to it, staying true to yourself, speaking on your own experience, and doing something so groundbreaking. I think to kind of close this out, it's what advice do you have for student athletes who want to do things like you, who want to change the landscape, who want to get out there, have a seat at the table in those rooms, have a voice in the landscape of this ever-changing landscape? What advice do you have for those student athletes?
Yeah, I think that's such a phenomenal question. That's the question that like everyone needs to be reminding themselves on for every student athlete or athlete that's in college or human that plays a sport in college. Just keep communicating with each other. Keep bringing these topics up. Keep advocating for yourselves, and don't let it just be complacent. Like I said earlier, it's not just me. It's not just either one of you. It's not just one person here or there. It's not just Sedona. It's the collective effort of all of us having the voice, so that we're not settling, for these aspects of, like in the future. Like there's a clause in the settlement that says, it's like one sentence in 130 pages, and it says after 4 years, for the future portion, you can't collect broadcasting revenue rights. So if you're a grad student or you have an injury and you go past 4 years, for whatever reason, you're not allowed to collect that. I don't know if that's okay. I don't think a lot of athletes would like to hear that. And I don't think a lot of athletes are going to catch that in 130 pages. And that's why more athletes need to have more conversations about this. We need to have more podcasts about this. We need to hear from more people. We need to have like a seminar about this, just so there's more understanding, more communication with it. But that's a great question. And I think the simple answer is for athletes and young athletes to keep talking about this and keep advocating to have a seat at the table, to be more involved, to educate themselves. If you don't know something, listen to this podcast. It's a great start. And I mean, it's amazing what both of you are doing for this. I think it's one of the best things in the space. And, just researching articles of knowledge, like read about the Ed O'Bannon case, read about Alston. I would encourage everyone to actually read how the NCAA started. If you read about how the NCAA started, I think you'll look at this whole situation quite a bit differently in the first event that was ever held for a NCAA collegiate event and what the payout was for that opportunity. So just educating yourselves and talking with one another are the two simple things I really think everyone has the power and resources in 2024 and later to do.
Grant House, this has been absolutely phenomenal. I will piggyback off of Elise's comment. I think it's very important to have these conversations because we don't understand through headlines, through any of the news articles, what it actually takes to stand up for something you believe in. None of us are in the situation where we literally have people talk any negative things, any negative hate comments to our face or close to us, and all these different messages, especially with some of the biggest meets of your life. And I just really appreciate not only you sharing all of this with us to help us understand better everything you're going through, but also just having the courage to stand up for something you truly believe in and spread this message as well with, I mean, sharing it with us and hopefully with everybody else that's listening here to finally close out what's next. What can we expect from you? What can we expect from the settlement? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, well, kind of time will tell. Like I said, Judge Claudia Wilkins can look at it the first day. Like we don't, I think we just got a glimpse of what the settlement could be. And if anyone doesn't have an understanding of what that is, just go back to English 101 or your sophomore year in English, and your teacher just asked you to make the brainstorm word chart and to make your first rough draft due by Friday. And that's basically what we just got. And we've got about another entire semester of rough drafts, proofreading, edits, revisions before we even get close to something that's going to be solidified for the betterment of athletes. And so I think that's where it's going to take some time. This isn't going to happen immediately. And I think everyone can, use that time to educate themselves and still talk with one another and inform themselves, when the time comes, maybe in August or September, from what's been released. I have no insights to that, just from the articles and the expert insights that I've read through, I've educated myself on. There will be signups that people can go to. There can be people that will opt in to this case. There'll be athletes that have opportunities to opt into it to better their statuses as well too. But other than that, in regards to me, I plan to keep competing. I know it's not in regards to the settlement, but I'm a strength coach at Streamline Performance Physical Therapy. I'm filling that cup up, a passion of mine, a lot more. And yeah, I plan to keep competing and just kind of enjoying life and trying to find more mastery in this, but trying to help athletes come together with a more powerful collective voice and united front to make a better lives for them, better career for them, and I mean, if we're getting really existential, like make a better life for my kids whenever that happens. No, that's not an announcement, but we're far off that. We got to find Mrs. House first, but just make a future that's better for college athletes. But I mean, it's going to be my name, so like my kids, I hope to be a good example and hope to create a better future for them. So just keep working towards that and just yeah, trying to make the world a better place and just find joy.
Through this podcast, you've shown us exactly that, and for that we thank you. We really appreciate your time, your insights. I think I speak for both Elise and myself in not only thanking you for your time, but just again for your courage, vulnerability, everything. It's been so special, and we look forward to having more of these conversations as everything progresses and we find out new things and see where everything lies and continue to educate us on the landscape. But for now, that's it for this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, please follow the podcast, share it with a friend. It's an important message. I think Grant's message is extremely important. His point of view, extremely important, seen like never before here. So make sure to share that with a friend. But for now, that's it for today, and we will see you all next week.
Bye. Grant, we're going to be there in LA 2028 cheering you on. Calling it now.